While Another Crab's Treasure might have cartoony graphics, it's the most realistic Souls-like game because the plot is kicked off by not wanting to pay taxes. As you can probably tell from the title, you do indeed play as a crab in this game, which if you're like me, seems a little weird to theme a Souls-like after, but theming is one of Another Crab's Treasure's biggest strengths. For example, the movement. When you're underwater, you sort of glide with your jump, kind of like Luigi from the new Super Mario games, because Krill is swimming through the water, although when you're on land, you just have a regular jump. Everything in this game is themed around two things, either natural things in the ocean or trash. Take your main weapon, which would usually be a sword or maybe some kind of staff. In Another Crab's Treasure, you use a fork. Every monster, just like you, uses common objects as weapons, such as bottles, pens, rulers, screws, party poppers, and a bunch of other stuff. Like, I don't even know what this is. No. Another thing that's affected by you being a crab is how you block attacks. Regularly, what would be done by a shield is done by your shell. Arguably, shells are the most important mechanic in Another Crab's Treasure. There are 3 different weight types to shells, small, medium, and large, and I'm fairly certain small and medium shells have minimal differences between the two, but the main difference with large shells is how dodging works. Regularly when you dodge, you do a little roll that maintains your speed when you exit the roll, except for when you have a large shell on, then you do a belly flop. You do this by sprinting, and as you're sprinting, hit the block button, you start rolling, which can be really useful to run away from a fight, or if you position it right, you can roll and build enough speed and deal damage when hitting a monster. The last thing about shells is that your spells are directly tied to them. Each shell is a specific spell assigned to it. Take the soda can, which its spell is shooting out balls that damage enemies if they run into them. Or the tennis ball again, which spell is charging up the roll so you don't need to roll down a hill to build up speed. These spells cost umami, which you start out with 3 charges that slowly refill when you attack enemies. You can upgrade your umami capacity by getting a collectible throughout the game. It's also very important to note that shells have durability. The higher the weight, the more durability it has. From here on out, there's going to be spoilers, so if that's not your thing, I strongly suggest you play Another Crab's Treasure and maybe come back to this video when you're done. Please, I need the watch time. But first, before you go, here's a word from our sponsor, me! These videos don't make themselves. Consider hitting that subscribe button if you enjoyed the video so far. Alright, the shilling's over. Krill is the hermit crab you play throughout the entire game, and the story starts off with your shell getting stolen to pay taxes to a duchess that you didn't even know existed. With your shell being stolen, you jump into the ocean to chase the shark that stole it. You run into some crabs that you think are friendly, but they try and kill you, and your only option being to run. After escaping, you find a rusty fork that you start to use as a sword, which also means you can start to fight back and make money now. It turns out since the last time you left the ocean, the area had been filled with trash and the world had switched to using a microplastic economy. After continuing down the path, you run into the game's first moonshell, which is pretty much this game's equivalent to campfires. Along with this is where you level up using your microplastics. You get microplastics by killing enemies just like every other Souls-like, I think. I don't know, I've only played Elden Ring for like an hour. After exploring for a little bit, you run into the Duchess's castle, but the guards stop you because you can't enter the castle without a shell. So they send you into a little side quest to get a shell. You find a vending machine and hit it and get a can, when all of a sudden the captain of the guard shows up and turns out you accidentally sold a shell, which kicks you into the first boss fight, which is pretty much an intro fight, and it'll probably take you a try or two unless you're like me and completely suck at video games. After you kill the captain, you have access to the castle, and I guess the guards just don't notice that the captain's dead, but like whatever, it's not your problem. After talking to the Duchess to try and get your shell back, she sends you on a special mission to pay off your debt, which is to get a shiny pearl. This is also where you unlock the grappling hook, which is a fishing line and hook. You swing around the castle for a little bit and end up in a cave where you have to ride jellyfish and grapple between the walls to get around. This is also where you find the second boss, which is a giant crab with a glass bottle. This cranks up the difficulty a little bit as you'll do multiple attacks in a row, and it's generally a lot more aggressive than the general. He also has a second phase where the glass bottle breaks. This is still a very doable boss. Along with the new attack types, this is the first boss to drop umami crystals, which is the currency you use to buy new skills. And this crab just happened to be guarding the moon snail, who is the one you pay to teach you these new skills. There's multiple ways to get umami crystals. You can get them by killing bosses such as the one you just fought, killing superpowered monsters, which are just regular monsters with more health and more aggressive. They also have purple eyes, and finally by finding giant shards throughout the world and breaking them. The moon snail has been talking to you throughout the entire time in the cave. I just didn't feel like bringing it up. She's also the one that technically teaches you how to use your shell abilities, but I'm stealing credit for that because I already talked about that. There's a high chance that by the time you talk to the moon snail for the first time, you've already collected more crystals than the 10 that Big Crab dropped. But if you haven't, just buy the parry and streamline. The parry is pretty self-explanatory, but streamline gives you the ability to dive mid-air, which is really helpful for running away and just movement in general. All 3 starter skills are very important, but if you only have 10, just ignore the charge attack for now. It'll more than likely get you hit if you're inexperienced. Besides that, I'll leave your skill choices up to you. It's not that big of a deal because there's more than enough crystals throughout the game to unlock all the skills. It really just comes up to how far out of the way you'll have to go to get the ones you really want if you make the wrong choice. This is the only place where you can unlock new skills, so luckily the devs were nice enough to put a moon shell in the same room, which also means you have an easy way out of the cave. At this point in the game, I thought the Duchess would be like the big bad, and we just have to continue to do tasks for her until you get your shell back. But as you teleport and run up to the castle, you find that it's in ruins, and the front guard loses his mind and starts to attack you. You don't necessarily have to fight back, but I'd recommend it because he drops more umami crystals upon death. From this point on, any boss, optional or not, or any super enemy drops crystals upon death. There's a good variety of enemies throughout the castle, and honestly there isn't really any reason to fight all of them, so I just run away. By the time you've made it to the castle for the second time, you've probably collected a stowaway or 2. These are status boosts / effects that you can equip on your shell. Each stowaway takes a certain amount of slots to equip, and generally they are more powerful the more slots they take. You start off with 3 slots but can later upgrade to 9 slots, but I'll get into that later. Anyways, explore through the castle and try and find a way back into the Duchess's throne room, where surprise, she somehow lost her mind too and seems to be sick of something. This sickness causes her to throw up and leave gunk around the battlefield with the majority of her attacks. If you get stuck in the gunk for too long, you'll get poisoned and also slow down. So avoid the poison as best as you can unless you want to die. To be honest, this is like the first real boss. It took me a good minute to take her down, and like I said, avoid the gunk, but also avoid her grab attacks. That goes for every boss in this game. By all means possible, try your best to avoid grab attacks because they're always the boss's highest damaging attack, and there's a good probability you'll panic after getting hit by one and get killed trying to heal after the grab. You can parry pretty much every attack in this game besides when Krill has a red symbol above his head, and that pretty much tells you to get out of the way or die. Although you still have to time your dodge roll or the boss will just adjust and still hit you. I had a problem with this throughout the entire game, but like I've said this entire video, I'm bad at video games, so you'll probably be fine. For your trouble, the Duchess drops the Royal Wave adaptation. Adaptations are pretty much your super spells. The Royal Wave is a massive sweep attack that makes every enemy you hit take an increase of damage from your attacks. You should probably take the time to read what each of your new adaptations are, otherwise you'll do what I did and use the Royal Wave as a finishing attack instead of a combo starter because you thought it looked cool. Apparently there's a way to upgrade your adaptations, but I never figured out how to, so good luck with that. Also for your troubles, you get to keep the shiny pearl you're going to give to the Duchess, but it's pretty much useless besides selling it. Now you might be thinking, CBguy, where do I sell things? And I'll get there, give me a minute. After you kill the Duchess, you might think that you'll get your shell back, but no, the shark that took it decides that since there's no more taxes, he's just going to sell it for profit, which obviously is a problem. He flees to New Carina to sell it to a shopkeeper, and obviously you chase after him. There's like a whole area you have to fight through to get to the town, but this video is already taking too long to get out, so I'm just going to skip it, because nothing really special here happens besides the game officially teaching you how to roll, but you've definitely accidentally done it by now. Anyways, you race into town and talk to all the shop owners to see if the shark had already sold your shell by the time you got to town. New Carina is a town built on a coral reef, so there's 2 layers to the town. The upper layer, which is pretty much useless besides a shell shop / clothing store, and the lower layer, which has all the useful parts of town. The lower part of town has a shop where you can upgrade your fork, a shop where you can buy stowaway / upgrade your capacity to hold stowaways, and finally a resource shop where you can buy a whole bunch of random stuff, along with where the shark sold your shell to, which the shop owner is willing to sell back to you for the generous price of holy shit! Alright gentlemen, that's a wrap. You're never getting the shell back. I'm just kidding, but that's a good place to end me talking about the story so you actually go play this game yourself. My main concern going into this game was how they could possibly keep the locations varied with a game set in the ocean, but honestly they don't have a problem with keeping things varied at all. I mean, just in the starting area alone, there's a sand castle surrounded by towers, a cave, a coral reef, and then a town built on another coral reef. And some of the other major areas are an algae forest with more deep caves, an oil-covered landscape dotted with workers of a major corporation and towns made of trash, and finally a pirate ship. Speaking of the Megacorps area, I got stuck in an optional boss for like 2.5 hours because I thought it was required. and the only reason I beat it was because I got stuck in a perfect loop with it where it couldn't keep up with me. But honestly, I don't regret it because like every boss in this game, once you beat it, it's just super satisfying. Another thing I have to compliment another Crab's Treasure on is how they use like the scale of items. Take the algae forest as example. There's a giant propane tank that they use as a tower, and it's just throughout the entire game. There's super creative stuff like that. There's one last thing I have to talk about. Yes, you can give Krill a gun, and yes, it does one-shot literally everything. But of course, me, someone with self-respect, would never use the gun to kill a boss. In all seriousness, another Crab's Treasure has a lot of accessibility options to make this game as easy or as hard as you want it to be, which I think is only a good thing. I mean, even if you were just to go around and insta-kill every boss with a gun, I think this game is still worth playing just for the story and the visuals alone. So pretty much, game good. You should play it. Okay, bye.